In 1988, a cartoon camel was as recognizable to American 6-year-olds as Mickey Mouse. That was not an accident. It was a strategy, and it worked on millions of kids who could not yet read a warning label. Here are 30 commercials that were normal in the 80s but are illegal today. R.J. Reynolds introduced Joe Camel to American audiences in 1988 as part of Camel's 75th anniversary campaign, and within 3 years, the cartoon mascot had become one of the most recognized advertising characters in the country. A 1991 study in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that 6-year-olds identified Joe Camel at the same rate they recognized the Disney Channel logo, over 90% recognition in both cases. The character wore sunglasses, played pool, and appeared on t-shirts and baseball caps bundled with cigarette purchases. Internal Reynolds documents from 1984 showed employees had identified the need to attract younger smokers, including those buying their first regular brand. The FTC filed a formal complaint in 1997 for unfair practices. Reynolds paid $10 million to settle with California, and the 1998 Master Settlement Agreement banned cartoon characters from cigarette advertising entirely. Bud Light debuted Spuds McKenzie during Super Bowl 21 in 1987, and within months, over 200 officially licensed products flooded the market, including plush stuffed animals that ended up in kids' bedrooms across America. The real dog was a female bull terrier named Honey Tree Evil Eye from North Riverside, Illinois. Senator Strom Thurmond stood on the Senate floor holding a Spuds plush, accusing Anheuser-Busch of using the mascot to glamorize drinking for kids. Mothers Against Drunk Driving filed their own accusations. Schools banned students from wearing Spuds apparel because it carried a beer brand logo. Christmas ads featuring the dog dressed as Santa were pulled in Ohio, where state law prohibited alcohol advertising using Santa's likeness. Bud Light credited the campaign with a 20% sales boost, but retired the mascot in 1989. In 1984, the FCC under Reagan relaxed restrictions on advertising to children, and Saturday morning television became an open market for cereal makers. Licensed characters from popular cartoons appeared on cereal boxes and in commercials that blurred the line between entertainment and product placement. The Center for Science in the Public Interest counted 54 Kellogg's commercials in 27.5 hours of Saturday morning programming. 98% promoted nutritionally poor products. Kids absorbed this every weekend, a steady message that sugar-loaded cereals were a normal part of breakfast. The FTC had actually proposed banning ads to preschoolers back in 1978, but Congress stripped the agency of that authority 2 years later under pressure from the food and advertising industries. The Children's Television Act did not pass until 1990. It cost nothing to say one sentence, but it made Calvin Klein a fortune. In 1980, 15-year-old Brooke Shields looked into Richard Avedon's camera and delivered a line that would define boundary-free advertising for a decade. "You want to know what comes between me and my Calvins? Nothing." CBS and ABC refused to air the spot. Reverend Donald Wildman of the National Federation for Decency called for a nationwide boycott, accusing the brand of exploiting a minor for profit. Shields later told Vogue she did not understand the innuendo at the time and was blindsided by the backlash. None of it mattered to the bottom line. Klein moved over 200,000 pairs of jeans in a single week. Shields was dropped after 1 year, not because of the scandal, but because the designer wanted his name on the product, not hers. The commercial that would trigger an immediate FTC investigation today was, in 1980, just another ad buy. Long before a cartoon camel targeted kids, real physicians did the selling on camera. Throughout the 50s and 60s, cigarette companies ran television spots featuring doctors who endorsed their brands by name. Camel asked viewers to consider that more doctors smoked Camels than any other cigarette, a claim the company manufactured by handing free cartons to physicians at medical conventions and then surveying them on their preferences. Chesterfield cited expert findings in 1953 that claimed smoking had no adverse effect on the nose, throat, or sinuses. Morton Levin had published his study linking smoking to lung cancer 3 years earlier. By the mid-80s, tobacco companies spent over $2 billion a year on promotion. The practice of using doctors as pitchmen for lethal products was never formally outlawed. It simply became too indefensible to continue. Johns Manville promoted asbestos as a miracle material, the foundation of a safe, fireproof American home. Their ads showed families in kitchens insulated with asbestos, kids beneath asbestos ceiling tiles, and workers handling the product without a dust mask. The faintly sweet smell of freshly cut asbestos board filled construction sites across the country, and nobody on the job questioned it. Internal correspondence unearthed during 70s and 80s lawsuits, known as the Sumner-Simpson Papers, revealed that executives had known for decades the material caused fatal lung disease. They discussed cancer risks in private memos while running public campaigns calling asbestos clean and modern. Dr. Irving Selikoff confirmed in the 1960s that exposure caused mesothelioma. The EPA issued a final rule banning most asbestos products in 1989, more than 40 years after the company's own scientists sounded the alarm. They called them rainbow diet pills because of their bright, candy-like colors, and for decades they were marketed as a simple solution for weight loss. What the ads left out was that the pills combined amphetamines with diuretics, laxatives, thyroid hormones, and barbiturates, a chemical cocktail that forced the body into shedding weight at any cost. Dispensing diet doctors built fortunes on the practice, one paying $71 for 100,000 amphetamine tablets and reselling them for $12,000. By 1970, roughly 10 million Americans were taking some form of prescription stimulant. The FDA pulled the original pills after dozens of deaths, but 80s television continued running weight loss ads with fabricated before and after photos and paid performers posing as satisfied customers. The FTC found that nearly 40% of those ads contained claims that were almost certainly false. He-Man did not start as a cartoon. He started as an action figure that needed a commercial, and in the deregulated world of 80s kids television, the entire show became that commercial. G.I. Joe, Transformers, Thundercats, and Gem existed primarily to introduce new toys that appeared in stores the same week their episodes aired. Each half-hour program was a product demonstration wrapped in a storyline, and the FCC's relaxed rules under the Reagan administration made it legal. Cartoon violence jumped from roughly 18 acts per hour in 1980 to over 26 by 1990. The moral epilogues tacked onto each show, the knowing is half the battle segments, were calculated additions meant to keep regulators at bay. Congress passed a bill to curb the practice in 1988. Reagan pocket vetoed it. The Children's Television Act did not arrive until 1990. No federal rule in the 1980s prohibited a beer commercial from showing a child in the frame, and plenty of them did. Ads placed kids in the background of party scenes, holiday gatherings, and backyard cookouts where beer and liquor were the centerpiece. Some brands used cartoon mascots and playful jingles that made no distinction between adult and underage audiences. The entire system ran on voluntary self-regulation, meaning the companies writing the rules were the same ones selling the product. There were no federal content restrictions aimed at shielding minors from alcohol promotion, no age-gating requirements, no mandated disclaimers about underage consumption. Research would eventually confirm that early and repeated exposure to alcohol advertising measurably increased the likelihood of underage drinking. The voluntary codes gained real enforcement power only after years of pressure from advocacy groups forced the industry to act. If you turned on your television in the 1980s, commercials told you where a woman belonged every 15 minutes. Cleaning products, laundry soap, and kitchen gadget ads showed women performing household labor with cheerful smiles, while husbands were either absent or shown making messes for their wives to clean. Some spots framed housework as a woman's contribution, her identity, her purpose within the home. A man might appear to taste the dinner or approve of the spotless kitchen, but the scrubbing was always hers. No advertising body reviewed commercials for discriminatory content. No regulation prohibited gender stereotyping. The ads reflected the assumptions of the era and reinforced them in a loop that went unchallenged for decades. They were never pulled from the air. They faded only when public attitudes shifted far enough to make them a liability. If the cartoon Camel sold cigarettes to kids, the Marlboro Man sold an entire generation something harder to regulate: an identity. Philip Morris plastered his image across every interstate, every skyline, every stadium entrance in the country from the mid-50s through the late 80s. Wyoming rancher Darrell Winfield became the face of the campaign in 1968 and held it for over 20 years, so iconic that by the 80s, Marlboro did not even need to show a cigarette. 4 horses and the red chevron were enough. Philip Morris reportedly spent $300 million searching for Winfield's replacement. At least 4 men who portrayed the Marlboro Man died of smoking-related illnesses, including lung cancer and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. The Master Settlement Agreement of 1998 banned outdoor tobacco advertising. The last Marlboro Man billboards came down in 1999. Cigarette commercials disappeared from television on January 2, 1971, but smokeless tobacco got a free pass for another 15 years. Skoal and Copenhagen ran ads throughout the 70s and 80s targeting young men with images of rodeo riders and outdoorsmen who packed a dip as naturally as they laced up their boots. The heavy tin sat in back pockets, the distinct bulge visible in every frame, and the spots never mentioned the sharp sting against gum tissue or the steady erosion the tobacco caused inside the mouth. The Comprehensive Smokeless Tobacco Health Education Act of 1986 finally extended the broadcast ban, but by then, a generation was already hooked. Sean Marcy, a high school track star from Ada, Oklahoma, started dipping at 12 after watching the ads. He was diagnosed with oral cancer at 17. He died at 19 in 1984. His mother, Betty Marcy, sued United States Tobacco Company. A jury in federal court found the company bore no liability. The Dutch Boy Paint Company used a cheerful blonde child as its logo for decades, and its advertisements encouraged parents to coat nursery walls in bright, glossy colors that kids could touch, chew on, and peel away in strips. The paint tasted sweet. That was the lead. Medical literature had linked lead exposure to brain damage, seizures, and developmental delays in young ones as early as the 1920s, but the Lead Industries Association spent decades funding research designed to cast doubt on those findings. Internal documents showed the industry knew the risks and downplayed them while marketing lead paint directly for use in spaces where toddlers lived and played. The brittle, flaking surface of old lead paint became a quiet hazard in millions of homes, and the chips were small enough for a child to swallow without a parent noticing. The Consumer Product Safety Commission banned lead paint for residential use in 1978, but existing stock continued to be sold and applied into the early 80s. In 1984, the FCC lifted its long-standing restrictions on program-length commercials, and overnight, American late-night television became a carnival of miracle cures, instant wealth, and products that solved problems nobody actually had. Ron Popeil sold kitchen gadgets with the urgency of a man defusing a bomb. Knife sets, food dehydrators, and rotisserie ovens filled the hours between midnight and dawn, packaged in 30-minute blocks designed to look like talk shows. The format was genius because it disguised the sales pitch as entertainment. The FTC had no authority to pre-approve ads before they aired, so the burden fell entirely on enforcement after the fact, a system that moved too slowly to keep pace with the flood of new content. Kevin Trudeau made millions selling books and supplements with unsubstantiated health claims before the FTC finally banned him for life from appearing in infomercials. By the time regulators caught up, the money had already been made, and the customers had already been deceived. If the 80s taught Americans that cigarettes could be marketed as glamorous despite the cancer risk, the tanning industry took that playbook and ran with it. Tanning salons advertised ultraviolet beds as a path to health, promising vitamin D benefits and a year-round glow that signaled vitality and attractiveness. The ads showed young women reclining in glowing chambers, eyes closed, smiles relaxed, as if the UV light pouring into their skin were sunlight on a Caribbean beach. No warnings were required. No disclaimers appeared on screen. The industry pushed the idea that controlled UV exposure was safer than natural sunlight, a claim with no scientific support. It took until 2009 for the World Health Organization to classify tanning beds as a Group 1 carcinogen, the same category as tobacco and asbestos. Multiple states have since banned minors from using commercial tanning beds entirely. Vitamin commercials in the 1980s did not aim their pitch at parents. They went straight for the kids. Flintstones vitamins, shaped like cartoon characters and coated in sugar, ran ads during Saturday morning programming that made the tablets look indistinguishable from candy. The bright colors, the familiar shapes, the playful jingles, all of it was engineered to make a child want to grab the bottle and chew as many as they could reach. Accidental vitamin poisoning among young ones was a persistent problem throughout the decade. The Poison Prevention Packaging Act of 1970 had mandated child-proof caps on certain products, but the advertising itself actively undermined the safety message by making the pills look fun and desirable. An FTC staff report in the early 70s had flagged vitamin ads directed at kids as a concern, noting that minors lacked the ability to judge whether they needed the product. The industry waved the criticism aside. In 1957, market researcher James Vickery claimed he had flashed the words "drink Coca-Cola and eat popcorn" on a movie screen for fractions of a second during a film, and that concession sales had surged as a result. The experiment was later exposed as a fabrication, but the panic it created was real and lasting. Throughout the 70s and 80s, Americans believed that hidden messages lurked inside commercials, magazine ads, and even rock albums. Wilson Bryan Key published best-selling books claiming advertisers embedded sexual imagery in ice cubes and crackers. The FCC declared subliminal advertising contrary to the public interest in 1974, but never issued a formal ban with enforcement teeth. The technique probably never worked, and the original study was a lie, but the fear it generated reshaped how Americans thought about the boundary between advertising and manipulation. In 1981, Boots Pharmaceuticals ran a consumer advertisement for its prescription ibuprofen brand Rufin, and the FDA had no clear authority to stop it. Direct-to-consumer prescription drug advertising barely existed before the 80s because pharmaceutical companies had voluntarily kept their promotions aimed at physicians. When Boots and then Merck, with its pneumonia vaccine Pneumovax, broke that unwritten agreement, regulators scrambled. The FDA did not assert jurisdiction over consumer drug ads until 1985, and even then, the rules required only a vague standard of fair balance between benefits and risks. Television drug ads remained effectively off-limits until 1997, when the FDA relaxed its rules and allowed broadcast commercials as long as they directed viewers to other sources for full-risk information. Before that shift, the era of prescription drug advertising operated in a regulatory vacuum where companies could promote medications to the public with minimal oversight and no requirement to list side effects on screen. Don Lapre appeared on American television screens in 1992 with a pitch so confident it bordered on performance art. Standing in what he claimed was his tiny one-bedroom apartment, he told viewers he had earned $50,000 a week by placing tiny classified ads in newspapers, and that anyone watching could do the same. His Making Money show became one of the top 10 most frequently broadcast cable infomercials for several years running. The initial package cost $40, but buyers were funneled into upsells that could run into hundreds or thousands. No substantiation was required for his earnings claims. The FTC's enforcement apparatus moved slowly, and the deregulation of program-length ads in 1984 had opened the floodgates for exactly this kind of content. Lapre later pivoted to selling vitamins with unsubstantiated health claims. In 2011, he was charged with 41 counts of conspiracy, mail fraud, and wire fraud. He died in custody before trial. If the thought of a cigarette company sponsoring a kid's cartoon sounds absurd, that is only because the regulations caught up. In the early 1960s, Winston cigarettes sponsored the Flintstones, and the animated characters appeared in commercial breaks lighting up and exhaling with visible satisfaction. Fred and Barney smoked Winstons on screen in ads that aired during a program watched overwhelmingly by young viewers. The commercials ran for 2 seasons before the show switched to other sponsors, not because of any government action, but because the network quietly moved on. Cigarette ads continued airing during Saturday morning programming into the late 60s with no formal separation between adult and kids content. The 1971 television ban ended broadcast tobacco advertising entirely, but the fact that cigarette makers had directly attached their brands to animated family entertainment for years went largely unexamined until decades later. Aunt Jemima, a character rooted in minstrel show imagery, appeared on pancake mix boxes and in television commercials for over a century. Her exaggerated features and dialect presented as warmth and trustworthiness. The Frito Bandito, a cartoon Mexican bandit used to sell Fritos corn chips in the late 60s and early 70s, was retired only after Mexican-American advocacy groups organized sustained protests against the stereotype. Sambo's restaurant chain operated over 1,000 locations in the early 80s, its name drawn from a kid's book steeped in racial caricature. No federal advertising law specifically prohibited the use of racial stereotypes in commercial content. The FCC's rules addressed obscenity and indecency, but offered no mechanism for challenging ads that reduced entire ethnic groups to cartoonish shorthand. These images were not hidden. They ran during prime time, in national magazines, and on packaging that sat on kitchen shelves in millions of American homes. They were not banned. They were eventually abandoned, one by one, as public pressure made them commercially toxic. The sugar industry ran advertisements in the 1970s and 80s claiming that sugar could actually help people lose weight by curbing appetite before meals. A strategy built on industry-funded research designed to shift blame away from sugar and onto dietary fat. Fast food chains promoted their meals as balanced nutrition. Vitamin-fortified candy was marketed to parents as a reasonable snack. The gap between what these products actually contained and what their ads promised was enormous, but the FTC had been effectively defanged. In 1980, Congress stripped the agency of its authority to restrict food advertising to kids, responding to corporate pressure from the food and broadcasting industries. The result was a decade in which companies could make sweeping health claims about products loaded with sodium, saturated fat, and processed sugar, and no federal agency had the power to stop them. Over 80% of food ads seen by kids promoted fast food, sugary drinks, candy, or salty snacks. A famous face could sell anything in the 1980s, and no law required that face to have ever used the product. Celebrities endorsed diet programs they had never followed, skincare lines they had never opened, and fitness equipment they had never touched, all for a paycheck and a camera crew. The FTC's endorsement guides existed on paper, but were rarely enforced, and the guidelines themselves were vague enough that advertisers drove through the gaps without slowing down. There was no requirement to disclose that a celebrity had been paid, no obligation to prove the endorser actually used the product, and no penalty structure that made compliance cheaper than the alternative. The system relied on good faith from an industry built on persuasion. Updated guidelines with real teeth did not arrive until 2009, 2 full decades after the worst abuses had already shaped consumer expectations. Car commercials in the 1980s sold speed, freedom, and chrome. They did not sell safety because they did not have to. No regulation required automakers to mention crash test ratings, airbag availability, or structural integrity in their advertising. The cars themselves often lacked the features that are mandatory now. No side impact airbags, no anti-lock brakes as standard, no crumple zones designed to absorb force in a collision. The dashboards were hard plastic or padded vinyl over rigid frames, and the steering columns did not collapse on impact. NHTSA had begun crash testing in 1979, but the results were buried in government reports that consumers never saw. Automakers advertised horsepower and handling while the crash data sat in filing cabinets. It took decades of advocacy, litigation, and public pressure before safety ratings became a selling point rather than an afterthought. The shift from the reckless advertising of products to the reckless advertising of substitutes for a mother's own body happened quietly, and it started in the hospital. Throughout the 70s and 80s, formula companies like Nestlé distributed free samples directly to new mothers in maternity wards, often with the implicit or explicit cooperation of hospital staff. The timing was calculated. A mother who used formula during her first days home was less likely to establish breastfeeding, and once the free supply ran out, she was a paying customer. Nestlé faced a massive international boycott beginning in 1977 over its aggressive marketing practices in developing nations, where contaminated water mixed with formula powder contributed to infant illness and death. The World Health Organization adopted the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes in 1981, but the United States was one of the few countries that voted against it. Domestic enforcement remained voluntary for years. They were sold in sets of 4, packaged in bright cardboard boxes with pictures of smiling families on the front, and the metal tips were heavy enough and sharp enough to sink 3 inches into a suburban lawn on a clean throw. Lawn darts, marketed under the brand name Jarts, weighed over a pound each and were designed to be hurled underhand across a yard toward a plastic ring target. Between 1970 and 1987, the Consumer Product Safety Commission logged roughly 6,700 emergency room visits linked to the product, the vast majority involving kids under 15. In 1987, 7-year-old Michelle Snow of Riverside, California, was struck in the head by a lawn dart thrown by a playmate and died from the injury. Her father, David Snow, launched a personal campaign to ban the product. The CPSC issued a full ban in December of 1988. Existing sets were ordered destroyed, but thousands remained in garages and basements across the country for years. Chlordane smelled like nothing you would want near your home, a sharp, acrid chemical odor that clung to soil and wood for years after application. But the ads told a different story. Pesticide commercials throughout the 70s and 80s showed families enjoying their lawns while kids ran barefoot across grass that had been treated with chemicals now classified as probable carcinogens. Chlordane, one of the most widely used termite treatments in the country, was applied in an estimated 30 million American homes before the EPA suspended its use in 1988. The chemical persisted in soil for over 20 years and was linked to increased rates of leukemia and neuroblastoma in young ones exposed in treated homes. DT had already been banned in 1972, but chlordane, heptachlor, and other organochlorine pesticides continued to be advertised for residential use well into the 80s, with no required warnings about long-term health effects for the people living inside the treated structures. R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris did not just advertise cigarettes, they gave them away. Throughout the 1980s, tobacco company representatives set up tables at concerts, sporting events, beaches, and festivals, handing out free sample packs to anyone who walked past. There was no age verification. There was no identification check. A 14-year-old who looked old enough or who simply walked up with confidence could leave with a pack of Marlboros or Camels in hand. The companies called it brand sampling and treated it as standard promotional practice, no different from a food company offering free bites at a grocery store. The practice continued for over a decade before the 1998 Master Settlement Agreement restricted sampling to adult-only facilities. By then, the free packs had already introduced a generation to nicotine. The toy guns advertised on 80s television looked real because they were designed to. Black metal finishes, weighted grips, moving slides, and mechanical clicking sounds made them nearly indistinguishable from actual firearms at a distance. Commercials showed boys in suburban backyards and wooded lots pointing these replicas at each other with no safety messaging, no disclaimers, and no visual indicator that the weapons were toys. The ads ran during after-school programming and Saturday morning blocks, reaching millions of kids who then carried the products into parks and streets. Multiple incidents of mistaken identity put young ones in danger when bystanders or law enforcement could not tell the difference. Congress responded with the Federal Toy Gun Law in 1988, codified as Title 15 of the United States Code Section 5001, requiring a blaze orange tip on the barrel of all toy and imitation firearms. Before that law, nothing on the product or in the commercial distinguished the toy from the real thing. In commercial after commercial throughout the 80s, Kids appeared on screen demonstrating products that no modern safety review would allow near a minor. They rode in cars without seatbelts fastened, sat in front seats without restraints, handled sharp kitchen tools, and operated electrical devices with no adult supervision visible in the frame. The ads were not selling danger. They were selling convenience, and the kids were props meant to show how easy the product was to use. No federal regulation governed how minors could be depicted interacting with consumer products in advertising. The Children's Television Act of 1990 addressed commercial time limits but said nothing about the content of the ads themselves. The sons and daughters in those commercials did what the script told them to do, and nobody with the authority to stop it was watching. Asbestos product commercials for home improvement aired regularly in the early 1980s, promoting insulation, roofing materials, and fireproofing solutions that promised safety and durability. These ads featured confident homeowners tackling weekend projects with products marketed as the smartest choice for protecting families. Hardware stores stocked the materials prominently, and contractors recommended them without hesitation. The commercials used reassuring language about strength and longevity, never mentioning what would happen when the fibers came loose. Families trusted these products because they seemed practical, affordable, and endorsed by experts appearing on screen with friendly smiles. Nobody imagined that the same material protecting their attic could slowly poison the air they breathed. When the connection between asbestos and deadly lung diseases became undeniable, regulators moved swiftly to ban both the products and their advertising. Homes across the country still contain materials installed during those trusting years. Today, it is haunting to watch old footage of these commercials, knowing the cheerful promises masked one of the deadliest hazards ever sold to families. Picture this: a hill, a rainbow of people with glasses full of Coke, and a tune so irresistible that it made the world think that a soda can bring everyone together. The Coca-Cola commercial that went on air in 1971, "I'd like to buy the world a Coke," was not just a commercial, but was a phenomenon.
I'd like to buy the world a Coke and keep it company.
It's like the anthem for anybody who has ever drunk a Coke and then thought to himself, "You know what this could do? It could solve world peace." The ad had a group of singers singing about harmony and happiness, all holding bottles of the soft drink. Fun fact, the song was so successful that it was released as a single and even reached the charts on the Billboard. My mom had it on vinyl, and I'm sure she still does, though I haven't seen it in years. Here's the kicker: it almost didn't happen. Rain nearly derailed the shoot in Italy, but when the sun was out, the impossible seemed possible. Coca-Cola got it right on the head with this one. They touched on something that is timeless. It makes me feel like I want to get a Coke, invite my friends, and sing about whatever. The jingle is no longer aired, but the message it sought to pass on to the public is timeless. Let's all just chill with a Coke. Is it even possible to drink soda if you don't hum this tune? Winston cigarettes sponsoring the Flintstones seems like a fever dream now. But in the early days, those animated commercials were as real as bedrock itself. Fred and Barney would take breaks from their prehistoric antics to light up Winston's, puffing contentedly while praising the smooth taste. The scenes showed cartoon characters sneaking away from chores, hiding from their wives, and sharing cigarettes like passing around a secret that made adulthood bearable. Kids at home saw their favorite animated heroes treating smoking as perfectly normal, even desirable. Parents laughed at the situations because they recognized themselves in Fred and Barney dodging responsibilities. The humor was situational, relying on classic domestic comedy tropes that happened to feature cigarettes as casual props. Nobody imagined these ads would become infamous examples of targeting children through trusted characters. When cigarette advertising on television was banned, these Flintstones commercials became shocking artifacts of an era that mixed cartoons and tobacco without hesitation. They remain banned and rarely shown except as cautionary examples of how advertising operated without ethical boundaries. Beer commercials during daytime family programming were a familiar sight in the 1980s, slipping between cartoons, sporting events, and holiday specials as if alcohol belonged alongside everything families watched. These ads featured laughing friends, summer barbecues, and celebrations that made drinking look like the natural reward for a day well spent. Children absorbed these messages alongside cereal jingles and toy promotions, learning to associate beer brands with happiness before understanding what alcohol did. Parents rarely noticed how often these commercials appeared during hours meant for young viewers, because the line between adult and family content barely existed. Nobody questioned why a product meant for adults was marketed heavily when children were watching. The ads normalized drinking in ways that shaped attitudes for an entire generation. When advocacy groups pushed for restrictions, networks slowly moved alcohol advertising to later time slots. Today, strict guidelines prevent beer commercials from airing during children's programming. But the memories of those sunny ads still linger, a reminder that advertising once reached audiences it was never supposed to influence. Maypo commercials were just silly and fun, which is exactly what made them so great. Marky, a boy in an animated commercial who does not want to take his oatmeal, wakes up to the maple-flavored Maypo. What happens next? He screams like a baby, "I want my Maypo!" as if that is the ultimate goal in life.
I want my Maypo!
Children all over America participated in it, and parents either giggled or cringed. My mom once put Maypo on my bowl of oatmeal when I refused to take my meal as a kid. It worked. I mean, who can resist maple-flavored mush? Maypo was the breakfast cereal that was popular in the 60s as a cereal children enjoyed while parents saw it as a healthy cereal for the family. The advertisements were prophetic in a way that used humor and animation to cement the brand into the public's consciousness. What you probably did not know is that Maypo was created in 1953 by the Maltex Corporation. They introduced maple sugar to the cereal range and made breakfast out of an ordinary meal into something special. Sadly, Maypo was off the air by the 80s, but the commercials remain with anyone who watched Saturday morning cartoons. This simple slogan, "I want my Maypo," became as famous as the cereal itself. Today, if you are lucky enough to get your hands on a box, please do not shout out loud about it. No, wait, shout it. It's the Maypo way. Bill Cosby selling Jello pudding pops in the 1980s was advertising synergy at its peak, combining America's favorite television dad with America's favorite frozen treat in commercials that felt like extensions of family warmth. The ads showed Cosby mugging for the camera, making faces, and delivering signature comedic timing while surrounded by children reaching for pudding pops. Parents trusted him implicitly. Kids adored his playful energy. And the commercials sold millions of desserts by associating the product with wholesome fun. The humor came from Cosby's natural charisma, his ability to make even a simple frozen snack feel like an event worth celebrating. Every commercial reinforced the idea that pudding pops meant happiness, togetherness, and innocent joy. For decades, these ads remained beloved examples of celebrity endorsement done perfectly. But when criminal allegations against Cosby surfaced and convictions followed, every commercial featuring his face became impossible to air. Jello severed ties, and the ads were pulled permanently. Today, those commercials exist in a strange limbo, banned not for their content, but for the man who made them famous. Diet pill ads with unproven weight loss claims flooded television screens in the 1980s, offering miracle transformations with nothing more than a bottle of capsules. These commercials showed before and after photos so dramatic they seemed impossible, featuring people who claimed to have lost dozens of pounds without exercise or dieting. The pills promised to melt fat, boost metabolism, and reshape bodies while viewers slept. Women, especially targeted by these ads, believed the testimonials because they came from people who looked like neighbors sharing success stories. Nobody questioned whether the claims were true or whether ingredients were safe. Parents kept these bottles in medicine cabinets alongside vitamins, trusting that anything sold on national television must have passed some kind of approval. When regulators finally demanded clinical evidence for weight loss claims, most of these products vanished overnight. The ads that once promised effortless transformation became symbols of an era that sold hope without proof. Today, strict guidelines prevent such bold claims from reaching the airwaves, but the memory of those miracle pills lingers uncomfortably. Elsie the Cow was not just any mascot. She was the mascot.
Beauregard.
Oh, Mom.
During the 60s, Borden's dairy products commercial made drinking milk and consuming cheese a family affair because of Elsie. Yes, a cartoon cow had more personality than half the television personalities of her generation. I recall seeing Elsie on everything from the milk cartons to cheese wrappings when I was at my grandma's. The commercials depicted her as a jovial, humorous cow with an ability to make people crave dairy products. Fun fact, Elsie first appeared in 1936 and was chosen as one of the greatest advertising characters of all time. Real quick, if you're loving this content as much as we loved making it, hit subscribe to stay connected and help us reach even more amazing folks like you. The ads were very family-oriented, and the portrayal of Elsie as the perfect mother who just so happened to be a cow was done in good taste. They made milk and cheese seem like something you could crave, which, let's face it, you can. Though Borden's is still in existence, Elsie is not the celebrity she used to be. But those old commercials? They're pure nostalgia gold. If you ever come across vintage Elsie merchandise, get it. It is a piece of advertising memorabilia. Now, every time I pour milk or slice cheese, it reminds me of Elsie the Cow. She was not merely selling dairy, she was selling experiences. And let's be honest, dairy just tastes better when it comes with a side of cute cow imagery. Jovan Musk commercials in the 1980s answered a question nobody had technically asked, but everyone secretly wondered about. The ads featured close-up shots of skin, whispered voiceovers, and slow-motion scenes that felt like someone wandered into a steamy foreign film. The tagline promised wearing the cologne would unlock something primal, delivered with sensuality that made living rooms feel awkward when the whole family was watching. Parents shifted uncomfortably, kids giggled without understanding why, and the product flew off shelves despite making everyone embarrassed. The humor came from how seriously the ads took themselves, treating a drugstore cologne like a potion capable of transforming ordinary people into objects of desire. Every frame dripped with exaggerated passion, every whisper promised forbidden excitement. But as standards for television advertising tightened, these overtly suggestive commercials became impossible to air during family programming. Regulators decided the imagery was too explicit for general audiences, and Jovan had to tone down dramatically. Those commercials feel like time capsules of an era when selling cologne meant selling fantasy. Pharmaceutical ads without side effect warnings ran constantly in the 1980s, painting every pill and syrup as a simple solution to life's discomforts. These commercials showed smiling families, active grandparents, and relieved workers returning to their lives after a single dose. The narrator spoke in warm, reassuring tones, promising fast relief without ever mentioning what could go wrong. Viewers trusted these ads because medicine was supposed to help, not harm, and the companies seemed too established to mislead anyone. Parents gave children cold remedies and pain relievers without reading fine print that barely existed. Nobody imagined that pills making their headaches disappear might carry risks no one mentioned on television. When regulations finally required drug companies to disclose side effects, the change was dramatic. Commercials suddenly filled with rapid warnings about nausea, dizziness, and far worse possibilities. Looking back, it is startling how many families medicated themselves based on commercials that told only half the story. Those old ads remain a reminder that silence can be just as misleading as any spoken claim. It's time to discuss the fruit that has an entire song dedicated to it. Chiquita Bananas weren't just fruit. They were stars, thanks to their Carmen Miranda-inspired jingle.
Chiquita Banana, and I've come to say bananas have to ripen in a certain way.
I'm Chiquita Banana, and I've come to say, don't deny it. You just sang that in your head. The adverts included a cartoon banana with a hat filled with other fruits to show us how to handle and consume bananas. Do not store them in the refrigerator, they advised. Let them ripen just right. It was like having a chef with a Broadway voice cook for me and explain what he was doing at the same time. Chiquita first introduced this tropical spectacle in 1944, and the campaign was so good that the song was played on the radio. The banana mascot had thus evolved into an American symbol by the 60s. My family adopted all of those lessons. No bananas in the fridge at any given time. The beauty of these ads was that they made the mundane and the prosaic look glamorous. Bananas became a luxury, entertaining, and a must-have in each breakfast. And who didn't want to join the chorus? Today's Chiquita logo is still in use, but the banana that sings is no more. However, for those of us who are old enough to remember this ad, there is always music playing in our heads when we are peeling a banana. Come on, you just ran your fingers over the skin of a banana to tell if it is ripe or not, right? Thanks, Chiquita. High Karate aftershave commercials promised something no grooming product had ever dared guarantee: that wearing this cologne would make men so irresistible they would need self-defense training to fend off admirers. The ads showed ordinary guys splashing on the aftershave and immediately being tackled, grabbed, and chased by beautiful women who could not control their desire. Each commercial ended with the absurd punchline, warning viewers to be careful because high karate was simply too powerful. Kids found the concept hilarious, watching grown men karate chop through crowds of swooning women like action heroes in a perfume commercial. Parents chuckled at the exaggerated premise, recognizing harmless fun that nobody could take seriously. The humor worked because it leaned so hard into the ridiculous that it became a parody of masculine fantasies. But as advertising standards evolved, regulators grew uncomfortable with the implication that women would lose self-control around men wearing the right scent. The commercials were quietly retired and high karate faded into obscurity. Today, those ads feel like relics of a time when absurd gender dynamics could be played for laughs. Toy commercials with exaggerated action sequences dominated children's programming in the 1980s, transforming plastic figures into epic heroes battling across landscapes that existed only in studio lighting. Kids watched in awe as action figures flew through the air, vehicles raced at impossible speeds, and playsets transformed into battlefields that looked nothing like what waited inside the box. The commercials used camera angles, sound effects, and dramatic music to create excitement no living room could replicate. Children begged for toys they had seen perform miracles on screen, only to discover that gravity and reality worked very differently at home. Parents spent money on products that never matched the promise, and disappointment became part of the holiday morning ritual. Nobody questioned whether these ads crossed a line, because exaggeration was simply how toys were sold. When regulators finally demanded disclaimers like "assembly required" and "sold separately," the fantasy started crumbling. Today, toy ads must show products as they actually perform. Those old commercials remain a reminder of how easily wonder can be manufactured and sold. A commercial that simply can't be forgotten. A cable car with its bell ringing and going up a rather inclined street in San Francisco, and a happy singer is shouting, "Rice-A-Roni, the San Francisco treat!" Yes, this ad made a boxed rice mix seem like the most delicious thing in the world, which was just as good as a trip to California. My parents would prepare Rice-A-Roni for dinner at least thrice a week, and I believed that I was from the royal family. It was fancy rice, with seasoning to boot. The commercials portrayed beautiful families enjoying a treat of a meal when, in fact, it was only 20 minutes and a saucepan away. Well, do you know that Rice-A-Roni has an immigrant story that is worth telling? It was invented in the 1950s by a Canadian pasta company and an Armenian family recipe. By the 60s, the commercial jingle had become so associated with San Francisco that you couldn't listen to it without thinking of the Golden Gate Bridge. Today, the box exists, but the commercial jingle no longer does. Perhaps millennials don't even know what they are missing out on. But those of us who grew up humming the San Francisco treat see the truth. It wasn't just rice, it was fancy rice, the kind of rice that people who have a lot of money eat. And yes, it did taste better because of the jingle. Crazy Eddie electronics store commercials were an assault on the senses in the best possible way, featuring a fast-talking pitchman who screamed at the camera like his life depended on selling stereos. His catchphrase became legendary overnight, shouted at such volume and speed that it felt like the commercial might explode. The ads promised prices so insane that competing with them was apparently impossible, and viewers believed they were getting deals that defied economics. Kids memorized the jingle, parents quoted it at dinner tables, and the sheer manic energy made these commercials impossible to ignore, even if you had no intention of buying anything. The humor was unintentional, but undeniable, because watching a grown man lose his mind over discounted televisions was comedy gold. People tuned in just to see what outrageous claim would come next. But behind the scenes, the real Crazy Eddie was running a massive fraud scheme that eventually sent him to prison. The commercials vanished once the scandal broke, and regulators cracked down on deceptive pricing claims that had fueled the campaign. Today, those screaming ads feel both hilarious and unsettling. Sugary cereal ads claiming health benefits filled Saturday morning airwaves in the 1980s with animated mascots, catchy jingles, and bold promises that made parents believe breakfast could be nutritious and fun. These commercials showed children bouncing with energy, excelling at sports, and outsmarting their friends, all supposedly thanks to a bowl of sugar-coated flakes. Phrases like "part of a complete breakfast" sat beside images of toast and juice, making cereal seem essential rather than optional. Parents trusted these claims because they came from brands feeding families for generations. Nobody questioned whether a product loaded with sugar could actually fuel growing bodies. Children begged for the cereals they saw on television, and parents obliged, believing the advertisements spoke truth. When nutritional research caught up with marketing, regulators began cracking down on misleading health claims aimed at young audiences. Today, those exaggerated promises would never survive federal scrutiny. The cereal aisle still sparkles with colorful boxes, but the wild claims of the 80s have been quietly retired, reminding us how easily trust can be manufactured. What was wiggly, jiggly, and made kids feel like they were living the best life in the 60s? Jello gelatin. The commercials where people said, "You can't be a kid without it," made having dessert seem like a necessity. Jello was not only a dish, it was an event. Simply watching it bounce on the spoon before it was eaten was half the fun. My grandma loved making Jello, and she had molds for every occasion: birthdays, holidays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Mondays, Wednesdays. I still recall how I used to look at those layers of neon color as if they were the most delicious pieces of cake. And let's not forget the ambitious recipes from that era: Jell-O salads with cottage cheese or, worse yet, tuna fish. The commercials were full of life, with kids laughing while they ate their gelatin creations. Jello was so popular that it could even boast with stars. Bill Cosby became the face of Jello by the 70s, thus making it a pop icon. Today, while Jello is still a product that can be bought in a supermarket, the commercials with catchy tunes are no longer with us. But if you grew up with "You can't be a kid without it" echoing through your living room, you know the truth. Jello was not only a dessert, but it was a sensation. And yes, it still bounces happily, like a little kid's belly. Joe Camel strolled onto screens in the 1980s with the swagger of a cartoon character who had wandered out of a jazz club and into every commercial break. The dromedary with the oversized snout, leather jacket, and perpetually cool demeanor became the face of Camel cigarettes in a campaign so slick it barely felt like advertising. Kids recognized Joe faster than most politicians, and studies confirmed children identified the cartoon Camel as easily as Mickey Mouse. The commercials showed Joe playing pool, riding motorcycles, and hanging out with attractive people who seemed thrilled to be near him. The humor was subtle but effective, turning a cigarette brand into something fun and impossibly stylish. Parents laughed at the absurdity of a cartoon camel living a cooler life than anyone they knew, but health advocates were horrified, arguing that a cartoon mascot was a deliberate strategy to hook young audiences before they understood smoking dangers. Lawsuits piled up, outrage intensified, and regulators forced the campaign into retirement. Today, Joe Camel stands as one of the most notorious examples of advertising that crossed a line nobody should have needed to draw. Tanning bed ads promoting safe sun alternatives ran frequently in the 1980s, promising golden skin without the risks of outdoor exposure. These commercials featured glowing models stepping out of sleek machines, looking bronzed, healthy, and impossibly confident. The message was clear: Tanning beds offered control, convenience, and beauty on demand. Salons marketed themselves as wellness destinations, and families saw nothing wrong with teenagers booking sessions before prom. Parents believed the advertisements because they seemed scientific, using words like controlled UV exposure that made artificial tanning sound medicinal. Nobody imagined these machines could damage skin faster than the sun they claimed to replace. When researchers linked tanning beds to dramatically increase skin cancer risks, the advertising landscape shifted overnight. Regulators banned claims of safety and health benefits that had filled these commercials. The sleek tanning bed became a symbol of danger rather than beauty. Today, it is chilling to think how many people trusted ads promising glow without consequence, unaware that the machines carried risks nobody mentioned until it was too late. If you have ever sung My Bologna Has a First Name, it's OSCAR, you have been the victim of one of the most effective examples of food jingle brainwashing.
My bologna has a first name. It's OSCAR.
This 1973 Oscar Mayer ad didn't just sell bologna. It made lunch meat the star of the sandwich. The commercial was of a cute little boy sitting on a dock with his sandwich and spelling the name of the brand like the alphabet. It was adorable, memorable, and, to be quite honest, brilliant. It is quite funny how a simple bologna can be so adorable. Fun fact, the jingle was composed in less than an hour, and then it became popular. Oscar Mayer even encouraged kids to sing it and made every lunchbox a stage to perform on. My cousins and I used to sing it like we were in a competition with American Idol. I must admit that even if you don't like processed meats, you have to appreciate this advert. It made bologna trendy, or as trendy as lunch meat can be. And let's not forget the second verse. My bologna has a second name. It's Mayer. It's funny and catchy. Today, it is just a reminder of the past that commercials were jingles and sandwiches were the norm. Every time I hear it, I find myself again in front of the refrigerator door, wanting a bologna sandwich. Miller Lite commercials turned a simple beer argument into one of the most entertaining ad campaigns of the 1980s, featuring retired athletes and celebrities screaming at each other over whether the beer tasted great or was less filling. The debates escalated into absurd physical confrontations, barroom brawls, and comedic standoffs that made choosing a side feel like the most important decision anyone could make. Kids imitated the arguments on playgrounds, parents quoted the catchphrases at parties, and the campaign became a cultural touchstone that transcended beer advertising. The humor worked because the stakes were deliberately low while the passion was cranked impossibly high. Watching famous athletes nearly come to blows over a beer slogan was comedy gold. But some commercials featured scenarios regulators found problematic, including depictions of drinking that implied intoxication was funny rather than dangerous. The more aggressive spots were quietly retired as alcohol advertising guidelines tightened. Today, those classic debates feel like relics of a time when beer commercials could be genuinely hilarious without worrying about the message they sent. Lawn dart ads showing children playing unsupervised filled television screens in the 1980s, presenting the heavy, sharp-pointed toys as the ultimate backyard fun for families. These commercials featured kids running barefoot across grass, tossing metal-tipped darts into the air, and cheering as they landed near plastic target rings. Parents watched these ads and saw wholesome outdoor activity, the kind of simple summer entertainment that kept children happy. Nobody questioned whether launching weighted projectiles near playing children might be dangerous, because the commercials made it look effortless and safe. The ads showed laughter, competition, and family bonding, never depicting the accidents emergency rooms documented across the country. When a child died from a lawn dart injury and grieving parents demanded action, regulators finally stepped in. The product was banned entirely, and the commercials that once made it look innocent vanished from the airwaves. Today, lawn darts remain one of the clearest examples of how advertising can shape perception, making danger look like harmless fun until tragedy forces everyone to see the truth. Sometimes you just feel that life is too much and all you want is a burger. The McDonald's "You Deserve a Break Today" commercial from the 70s made all of us feel like we could say, "Yeah, I've earned this." It
You deserve a break today, yeah.
wasn't just about fast food, it was about self-care with fries. In the commercial, people were smiling and eating McDonald's food after they had come from work. The jingle is catchy and hard to forget, like ketchup stuck on the fries. It convinced you that a Big Mac was the ultimate prize for growing up. Here's a fun nugget. This campaign assisted McDonald's in their change from being known as a quick meal place to becoming a family restaurant. The ads were so good that they have been remade several times, but there's no substitute for the first. Well, I must confess, each time I am at the drive-thru, I sing this song in my mind. It's practically Pavlovian. And to be quite frank, they were not entirely wrong. It's nice to be able to sink your teeth into a cheeseburger you didn't have to cook yourself after a long day at work. The campaign may be gone, but the message remains. Treat yourself. And if that treat happens to come with a Happy Meal toy, even better. Clara Peller became an unlikely superstar in the 1980s when she squinted at a tiny hamburger patty and demanded to know where the beef was hiding. The Wendy's commercials featuring this elderly woman and her exasperated catchphrase became instant sensations, spawning merchandise, political references, and parodies that proved how deeply the phrase penetrated American culture. The humor came from Clara's genuine frustration, delivered with authentic annoyance that viewers could not help but laugh at. Kids repeated the line constantly, parents used it to complain about anything disappointing, and Clara herself became a celebrity interviewed on talk shows. The original commercials were harmless, but Clara's subsequent appearance in a competing pasta sauce commercial violated her Wendy's contract and sparked a legal battle that ended her advertising career. Wendy's pulled the campaign, Clara faded from public view, and the phrase lingered as a cultural artifact with a complicated legacy. Regulators also scrutinized the ads for misleading claims about competitor sizes. Today, those commercials remind us how quickly advertising gold can turn controversial. Cigarette ads with doctors endorsing smoking carried a strange authority in the 1980s, lingering from campaigns that had started decades earlier. These commercials featured men in white coats, stethoscopes draped around their necks, calmly explaining why one brand was smoother, easier on the throat, or preferred by medical professionals. Families trusted doctors more than almost anyone, so seeing them associated with cigarettes made smoking seem medically acceptable. Parents who might have questioned the habit instead felt reassured by the professional endorsement flickering across their screens. The ads used scientific language, clinical settings, and calm voices to transform a deadly product into something that looked almost healthy. Nobody questioned why a doctor would promote something that caused cancer, because the connection between smoking and disease was still being suppressed by tobacco companies. When the truth finally emerged and regulations tightened, these ads vanished almost overnight. Today, it is disturbing to realize how effectively a white coat and a confident voice convinced an entire generation that cigarettes were safe. They sold it all to your family and called it normal. Like and subscribe if you remember when the warning labels did not exist.